just an object. The music comes from inside. The instrument is the tool which makes a particular language.
What did you study?
The people. Well, the studies have to be divided into two categories. Those of the academy and those of the areas usually located across the railroad tracks.
Was there a conservatory across the railroad tracks?
No, there are never conservatories across railroad tracks.
What was across the railroad tracks?
Grass and trees.
No people?
Well, people are everywhere, but that's not generally accepted because the statement seems to imply that the same conditions would exist. But there are people and there are people.
In that case, what do you think of musicians such as Stockhausen?
He doesn't come from my community.
What do you think of Johann Sebastian Bach?
He doesn't come from my community either.
What do you think of John Cage?
He doesn't come from my community. One of those people might live in New York. We don't have the same tastes. You know, we don't read the same books. We don't eat the same food. We don't dance the same dances. My community, as I said before, is usually on the other side of the tracks. We have to make distinctions. The interesting thing that happens is that although we may live in the same time or in the same place, we are not accorded the means that people who are existing at the same time are accorded. This is true certainly on an economic level. It is true in terms of education, and it is most assuredly true socially. Now, whatever I choose to take, or use, or just am attracted to, the reality is that a separation exists, and that's all I'm talking about.
Great words from Cecil Taylor, taken from a documentary that he was in 1968. Interesting things he had to say about the composers that I'm sure he was compared to at the time, and I actually like a lot of those composers too, but I totally am from the same place that Cecil's from. I really admired this musician. I wish that I would have been able to see him play live, or even meet him. Unfortunately, I found out a few months ago Cecil Taylor passed at the age of 89. Very controversial musician. I'm not just going to say jazz musician, I'm going to say musician. And I think he personified what jazz was really about. Jazz was really about listening. And I'll tell you guys this. Every movement that came after bebop, to me, was post-bebop. That's just my own theory and just my observation, of jazz movements when it came to this genre. Cecil helped he was among the first to find or found a movement called free jazz, which is actually one of my favorite movements in jazz because I think it personified bebop, let alone jazz, and jazz's intentions. You know, when Charlie Parker had the band speed up the tempo, it was to not make people dance, it was to make people listen. And a lot of it was because of the things that black people were going through at that time. And just, you know, not being able to go in the front door to play a club that you're bringing entertainment to, let alone all the other discriminations that were going on back then. Bop had really fast, you know, it was fast and just frantic. And all these melodies were thrown up and down, and there's so many different things that happen. Now, I know there's a lot of other movements after bop that didn't have that kind of sound, but at the same time, it had the intention. Even cool jazz, all that slow down stuff, it was definitely a listening thing, more relaxed. And then we had hard bop. I'm probably skimming over all the movements, I know, which was like bebop, but even more intense. And then came avant-gardist. You know, I mean, we could use that term loosely with all the movements, really. But free jazz artists like John Coltrane, which I just found out that Cecil did a recording with him. I didn't know that. John Coltrane, Ornette Coleman, Cecil Taylor, Don Cherry, the list goes on. I could name so many people. And I've been able to see people like Muhal Abrams and the Art Ensemble of Chicago, which Cecil actually played with them. You guys could look up that on YouTube. And just there's so many different like inspirations from that movement for me personally. Ornette Coleman definitely, and Cecil, you know, this is about him, obviously, because I just found out he passed, unfortunately. Cecil in and of himself was very high energy. He said he played like a high energy player, you know, like that's the way he thought of piano, as a percussion, as a drum, you know, as a drum set, drum period, you know, which piano actually is a percussive instrument. It's a string and percussive instrument. It's like the instrument of all instruments that I've not been so successful in playing. I'm more of a bass player, play stand-up and electric bass professionally for a while. But his playing, you know, I pretty much resonated with that because that's how I play. And although I stretch a lot of genres and all that, I've done a lot of freeform stuff, free jazz, free like rock and roll. Excuse me, the noise is unbearable out here. And all kinds of stuff, you know, classical. The thing is with Cecil, a lot of people don't understand like where he's coming from. I've heard people kind of bag on him because they think it's just noise. When you listen to Cecil, you hear things that you never heard a piano do. You hear elements of Bartok. You hear elements of Thelonious Monk, of course Duke Ellington, you know, Ligeti. Definitely jazz and classical, but it's what he did with it. This picture right here totally manifests his playing style. It's amazing, just like very high energy, beautiful, brutal, dark, but at the same time liberating. Nothing evil about it, in my opinion. And you know, Branford Marsalis, I was really bummed out on that Ken Burns thing where he just totally basically said that Cecil Taylor's playing was self-indulgent BS. And I think Cecil played concerts to himself, or mini concerts. Just, I mean, shoot, you got to enjoy your craft. You're just jamming out. And you know, Branford's definitely a traditionalist, you know, and for me, like personally, I think it was like you're dissing an elder, you know, and just, that's not cool, you know. And I just think that Cecil, he people would call him an extreme, but at the same time, like, he was very traditional in the way that music is celebrated, at least where I'm coming from. You know, the man, I mean, there's so much things about him. Yes, he was actually a teacher at universities, quite a bit of them. He wasn't just playing noise, he played music. And a lot of the stuff that he played, he could actually write out. I'm sure he could, and do it again. I've heard people tell me that about him. I've known players that have played with him, you know, and it's cool to hear just, the stories. And, unfortunately, that's actually how I found out. I didn't know. I've been so out of the loop. It's the same thing with Ollie Wilson. I didn't know he passed. But Cecil Taylor is one of my favorite pianists. And I think he exemplifies the freedom when it comes to playing music. Definitely classically trained, and definitely was in the jazz tradition, but also expanded both of them, fused them together and made them just basically, a lot of people say, I know that jazz has classical roots, but this guy emphasized that in ways that made you listen. Not only listen to the genres, because he went beyond that, but listening to what he was trying to tell you. Pretty much his interview summed it up where he came from. And I resonate with that when it comes to just, music, spirit, and light, when it comes to that. Another fun fact about Cecil Taylor, actually he played he played in the White House. I guess Jimmy Carter was in the office at the time. And I was surprised to find out that he played there with a few other jazz musicians and stuff. But it's the way that Cecil Taylor played, and I think from what I understand, a lot of people were tripping out. They're just it was really intense. But Jimmy Carter went over to him and was just impressed with his hands. He's just looking at it man, how did you do that? The dude could play. Cecil was amazing, man. Seriously. Yeah, Cecil Taylor, you're going to definitely be missed, man. 89 years old. I forgot to mention that he was also a poet and stuff, too, and did a lot of performance art type stuff when it came to his gigs. He'd come out dancing and hitting things and all that, and had dancers. He really believed in expressing the music, and just he wasn't just an improviser, he was a composer as well. And his music should be examined by many. I admire his stuff because I'm a very high energy person when it comes to playing myself, and just I like the dissonance. I like the weaving between, some people will say there's no melody. It was woven in and out, lots of them. There's so many songs that I could, think of, but yeah, if you guys get a chance, check him out. Check him out. And it's the earlier stuff was more conventional. Some of you guys might be more into that than the later stuff, like Three Phases. I like all of it, especially the freer stuff. Anyways, memory eternal to Cecil Taylor. Rest in peace. P.S. I'm going to put one of my favorite solos in the description. I couldn't just put this in video. You guys have to go to the video yourself and watch it. It's just amazing. Peace.